And we'll be there for you. Welcome to the first edition of Film and Other F Words. I am Zach Lyons, and I am an idiot because I am not sure what the 3 technique is. To help me figure that out, we have Mike Herndon of Music City Miracles at Mike Miracles on Twitter. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Did
you like that theme song?
I love the theme song, actually. It made me feel like I was in like a 90s boy band.
I can't wait to see. This is going to be kind of a semi-week or bi-weekly? Semi-weekly?
I have no idea.
It's going to be every other week, or we're going to send this audio over to Titans Film and Other F Words. Get it? Because he's Titans Film Room. We're Football and Other F Words. And basically, I've learned in being in a bunch of these conversations that I really don't know football as well as one should who has to talk about it. Luckily, I am very good looking, so that really helps on a podcast show. So I'm going to interview Mike, and kind of we're going to have a good back and forth, and Justin Graver of Titans Film Room is going to put it all to video. So we've already had a discussion about all this topic, so there's already because this was originally just going to be a blog post. And so it's going to be a blog post on our website, fwordspodcast.com/blog, as well as the video will be on YouTube and posted up on the website and posted on Twitter when it's ready. So, Mike, like I said, I'm an idiot.
Yes.
So what is a 3-technique defensive lineman? Explain it to me like I'm a fucking idiot.
All right. So, idiot. A 3-technique. It's really the word technique, I think, is what kind of throws people off sometimes, because when you hear technique, you think, oh, it's a way of playing, or it's some sort of move that they're doing or something like that. Well, that's not really it at all. So the 3 technique simply describes where a player lines up on the defense relative to the offensive line. So the basic idea is you start with a zero technique, which is really called a nose tackle. Nobody really uses the term zero technique. That is lined up heads up over the center. And then in the gaps, you go with odd numbers. So between the centers and guards on each side is a 1 technique. If you line up heads up with the guard on either side, it's a 2 technique. Between guard and tackle is a 3 technique. Heads up on a tackle is a 4 technique, and so on and so forth. It gets a little bit odd when you get outside to the tight end. The tight end heads up is a 6 technique, as you would expect it to be. But then an inside shade on a tight end is called a 7 technique, whereas an inside shade on a tackle would be a 4-eye, and an inside shade on a guard would be a 2-eye. And then outside of a tight end is a 9. So when you hear people talk about a wide 9, they're talking about a player that lines up outside of the tight end or outside of where the tight end would be lined up. So sometimes if you don't have a tight end on that side and you're playing a wide 9 technique, you're still going to line up outside of where the tight end would be aligned. So that's, a lot of times you see it if you watch Cameron Wake, the Titans' new defensive end with Miami. He lined up outside in a very wide 9 technique a lot in Miami on third down pass rush situations, trying to get a better angle to attack the edge from. So the 3 technique is simply where a player lines up, and that is between a guard and a tackle.
So when you go back and listen to this audio, you'll realize that you did not explain it to me like I'm an idiot. Because that's a lot to take in one setting.
Then I went too far.
You went too far. So to clarify, the 3T is what we're going to call 3 technique from here on in.
Okay.
3T lines up between a tackle and a guard, or a guard and a center.
No, it's between a tackle and a guard.
Well, then you would just say yes, the tackle and the guard, because I gave you both choices.
Sorry, I thought you were saying that they line up in either spot.
No.
A 3 tag
which
lines
spot,
up
I guess,
between the tackle and guard
Gotcha.
on either side.
Gotcha. So looking at, and we have this picture going to be up on the blog, they're mainly responsible for one gap in between and that is that lane that is between the tackle and the guard, correct?
Right, exactly. So if you look at it from an offensive standpoint, offenses describe the gaps between offensive linemen as the A gap being between the center and the two guards on either side. And then the B gap is between guard and tackle, again, on either side. And then C and then D as you get out further. So the 3 tech is going to always be lined up in the B gap pre-snap. And that's going to be the gap that he's responsible for because, if we'll talk a little bit more, I think, about 1 gap versus 2 gap responsibility for defensive linemen. But when you're lined up in the gap, you're really only responsible for that gap.
Okay, so we're a 3-4, but we do front multiplicity, if I could talk, but I'm a fucking idiot, so of course I can. Is the 3T, the 3 technique, scheme specific?
It's not scheme specific, though it is more commonly associated with a standard 3-4 or 4-3 defense. So, but you can have a 3 technique with the hybrid 3-4 fronts that we see more commonly in the NFL today. Very few teams run a true straightforward 2-gapping 3-4 anymore. Most of them are a hybrid where you've got some guys that are 2-gapping, some guys that are penetrating 1-gap attack type players, and that's typically what your 3 technique is going to be.
Is the player that is the 3T, I think I'm just going to say 3 technique. I know we said 3T, but let's say 3 technique. Limited to which side of the field he is successful on?
No, it really works to either side. And a lot of times, like, for example, what the Titans did with Jarrell Casey, during the era when LeBeau was with the Titans, Casey and Daquan Jones played on side. So Casey would always line up on the left side of the offense, so over the left tackle or left guard in that side of the offense. And then Jones was on the right side. In Dean Pease' defense this past season, they actually flip-flop sides. So basically, depending on the strength of the offense and the call of the defense, they wanted to get Casey lined up in the 3 technique as often as possible because that really accentuates his skill set.
So 3 technique is pretty much most commonly associated with 4-3 fronts. Who is a 3 technique player that someone could go watch to see, okay, this is the perfect 4-3 technique player?
So my favorite current guy going in that scheme is Geno Atkins. And Gerald McCoy is another guy that I think very highly of that's in that role. But Geno Atkins is kind of your prototypical 3 technique defensive tackle. He's a quick guy. He's a penetrator. He's able to cause a lot of havoc on the inside of that defense just by shooting gaps and beating offensive linemen to the point.
So hypothetically, because what brought this idea of this whole series was a conversation that we had in a big group chat about Gerald McCoy becoming a Titan, because I think you said something about him being another 3 technique, and then Superhorn had said something, well, that doesn't really matter, or a couple of people said it doesn't really matter in today's thing. Was that he's only played in a 4-3 at Tampa. He's never played anything else. Was he Tampa Bay's primary 3 technique?
He was, yeah. Okay. And that's the role he's played ever since. I think his rookie year they moved him around a little bit, but he is stuck in the 3 technique really there ever since. So he's spent the vast majority of his career playing that role.
So hypothetically, if we sign or trade for him and he comes to our sort of hybrid 3-4, what issues, if any, do you think would arise from having 2-3 techniques?
It's not really necessarily an issue. Both players can play other techniques. So both Casey and McCoy could play, a 4 technique or a 5 technique, which are the common techniques that you would use opposite a 3 technique in the Titans defense. But I would say asking them to play in those roles won't, I guess, accentuate their pass rush ability and their ability to penetrate quite as much as playing in the 3 tech would. Now, they might be able to rotate in and out, and of course you would have the benefit of, you never have to have a point in the game where you don't have one of those guys on the field in a 3 technique, which would be a benefit. You could certainly make it work, and it's a, kind of a a blessing to have that kind of problem. It's certainly a first world problem, but it would create a situation where one of those guys is not really going to be fully maximized, I guess is what I would say.
So what problems would arise from both those players playing three technique at the same time on each side of the nose tackle?
So ultimately that comes down to it's hard to explain without a diagram, really.
And we'll have diagrams, I'm sure, on the video, but we also we'll have them on the thing. But so bear with us. This is not made for audio.
So the problem with playing 2-3 techniques at the same time is you run into gap problems. And basically what I mean by that is depending on where the offense is lined up and how the offense is lined up, you're going to have a hard time defending that outside gap on the strong side of the offense if you've got 2-3 techniques. So you're essentially going to end up in a situation where you've either got an edge defender who's responsible for 2 gaps, which is really virtually impossible to defend because an edge defender by nature has to keep his outside shoulder clean to defend against anything getting outside of him. He's a contained defender. His job is to force everything back inside, so he can't 2-gap. So you're really either relying on a backside linebacker to be able to get over and cover a gap, or hoping that maybe you can get a fill-in safety coming up. But really, if your safety is responsible for a gap, that's not a sound front defensively.
So when you refer to gap or 2-gapping, because we're about to get into a lot of that term, are you talking about 2 separate gaps, or are you talking about the 2-gap?
So it's 2 separate gaps. So what 2-gapping really means is when a defensive lineman is lined up, we'll say heads up, like a defensive lineman is lined up against a tackle, and he is nose to nose with the tackle. They're aligned. Sometimes that's a common front for the Titans. They use that a lot with Daquan Jones. And his job on that play is not to penetrate and create disruption in the backfield, but rather to control that tackle and be able to shed and play either side of him. So the B gap on the inside or the C gap on the outside, if a play comes there, he's responsible for being able to get to either gap. So his job is to basically shock the tackle, control him, and then shed to go make the play.
You were talking about linebackers and safeties when you have 2-3 techniques on the field because they can only mine one gap.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that a bigger problem? Because shouldn't your linebackers be able to close in on a running back easier than a defensive lineman?
So your linebackers certainly are going to help in the running game, but ultimately you want your linebackers as much as possible to be able to flow to the point of attack and make tackles rather than being concerned with, certainly you aren't going to ask a linebacker to 2-gap. You want them flowing and attacking rather than being responsible for, an extra gap somewhere.
So let's talk about the draft. It's right around the corner. When you see scouts or analysts say that an interior defensive line prospect is better suited for a 3 technique, does that mean that as a fan of a team running a 3-4 that the chances become slimmer that he is a viable option if you already have a good 3 technique?
I'd say that's true to some degree. That if you've already got a guy that's a good penetrator, and it's a very specific skill set really, because you're looking at a 3 technique. You're looking for a guy that's disruptive. He's quick. He's able to knife in and create penetration and disruption. Whereas if you're looking for a 2-gap defender, you're looking for a stout player who's able to control and shock and shed. So, you've got guys like in this draft, for example, that I think could be a little bit of both. And guys like Jerry Tillery, Charles Omenihu, Anthony Nelson, kind of longer players that are stout enough to hold up at the point of attack in a 2-gap kind of role, but could also add some pass rush juice on third downs in a four-man front.
So for the Titans in this instance, we have a great three technique in Casey. We've kind of talked about this on the last podcast. We've lacked a proper nose tackle for a while since switching to the 3-4, and Daquan has been an average at best, and I think I'm getting this right, a 5 technique. Mm-hmm. What's the most viable solution currently to help Casey in this defense get more pressure?
So I think, part of the reason that there's been so much criticism on Jones and Johnson is their lack of production as far as sacks go. And to be clear, what they've been asked to do and the roles that they've been playing on the Titans during their time, both of their times here, is not a production-oriented role. That is a role that is responsible for allowing linebackers to make plays. So their job is to keep their gaps clean, basically keep responsibility of their gaps, and then allow and control the offensive linemen so that they can't climb up to that next level and start picking off Jayon Brown and Rashaan Evans and Wesley Woodyard. So I would say that while Jones and Johnson certainly aren't star players by any means, they probably deserve a little bit more credit or leeway from the fan base than they've gotten so far, because they're performing the role that they're being asked to do. It's just that role isn't exactly a spectacular role to fill. But I would say that from a third down standpoint, the Titans could certainly use some more pass rush juice from the inside, because you really got Casey and then, nobody else that rushes from the inside. Usually the Titans would bring a third edge onto the field if they really wanted to load up to go after the passer on a third and long. But I think from an early down perspective, the Titans are actually in better shape than most view them from that standpoint. But maybe if you added a true nose tackle, because really Johnson and Jones are both probably better suited for that 4/5 technique role on the opposite side of Casey. Whereas a true nose tackle like a Dexter Lawrence or even like a Dalen Mack later in the draft could help free those guys up to play that role and also give some good interior push on pass rush downs that could help the edge rushers and Casey get home easier.
All right, so I'm an idiot, so let me make sure before we go that I got this right. A 3-technique defensive lineman is a pass-rushing defensive lineman that lines up between the guard and the tackle, who has only his gap responsibility for running plays, and his main goal in passing situations is to get to the quarterback.
That's a good summary. You want a guy that's going to penetrate and disrupt.
That's what she said.